shout out to the viewer who suggested this idea. We are going to rank knives not by their skin but by their type. We have plenty of types. I did a video like this a year ago. We have some new types, so it's time for an updated list. At this point we have so many different types: default, X, sword, dagger, butterfly knife, karambit, so many different knives. I'm gonna put them into an order, and of course we are going to start with the worst one, and that's the default knife. I don't even know if there's a specific name for this. You know, the eagle knives, the smite knives, nebula knives, outpost knives, knives that essentially don't have any animation. There's just nothing special about them. Straight up, nothing about this makes it usable in my opinion in comparison to all the other knives that we have. And I'm also counting the blast X and the mage punk 1.0 knife towards these kind of default looking knives, because I don't think there's anything special about them, even though they have this small pop-up animation. But yeah, definitely in my opinion the worst knives that we have in this game. Next up, a type that I also don't enjoy too much as of now is the dual wield. I think the dual wield has potential, but as of now I don't think there's any dual wield knife out there that actually makes it really good. I think the one that actually had potential was the smart knife. I think visually it looks pretty good, but it just doesn't have any animations that make it too special. So for now I don't know, I just think it feels off, and definitely not as good as all the other knife types that I have in this list. Next up, the big boy knives, the big boy swords, the two-handers. We have swords in this game. We have swords like the Sovereign or the Hive Mind. Those are one-hand swords, same animation as the Axe, for example. But the two-hand swords like the Preload to Chaos or, you know, Ruination, those are swords that I think visually they look pretty fucking cool. Let's be real, they look awesome. If we just take a look at the design in game, I just feel like they are too big. They just look a bit too clunky. I think it just doesn't like fit the first person theme too much in comparison to what it looks like in the menu, right? It looks super dope if we just take a look at it in the preview. In game, it just feels a bit too big in my opinion. It takes up too much space. But the next place, I actually like playing those, even though they aren't placed too high. I like the claw type of knife. The claw type of knife only had the original animation, right? So that's why I'm just gonna call every one of these claws knives, like the Genesis blade, the Origin blade, the Iron claw, the Oni claw. They look cool. They actually look pretty good. I like their design, but the animation in itself, which is the important thing here, I like it. I think it's definitely a cool animation. It's not the top tier animation in comparison to all the others, but it's definitely a decent one. And I will say within that type of knife, I think the Oni claw still till this day probably might be one of the best out there. The Origin blade, for example, has a pretty cool inspect animation, but besides that, the blade itself looks pretty boring. So yeah, I do like that, you know, type of animation though. Same goes for the mage punk claw. The mage punk claw actually looks pretty insane, but in comparison I just don't use it too much because we have so many other good looking knives, which gets me to my next place, and those are the axes. Now the axes, I think back in the day when we had the Prime X, when we didn't have too many type of knives, actually pretty top tier knife. Nowadays I think it's still pretty decent, even for the battle pass knife like the Sys X, for example. They have decent skins. I like him. Gaia's Vengeance, also pretty decent example as to how good axes actually can be if they look nice. So yeah, overall definitely a solid type of knife, and the OG, because yeah, the Prime X was the first X to ever release, or the first knife skin to ever release in the live version of Valorant. So yeah, definitely good looking knives. Next up has to be the swords. The swords, the one-hand swords this time around. One of the best swords till this day, I think, is the Sovereign sword. It just looks clean, simple, to the point, nice animations, decent subtle animations, and overall just a good looking sword. And I think till this day, it's one of the best ones out there. Obviously, we have so many knives that have the same animation at this point, so many swords, and then the fact that they also share the same animation with the axes. It's so much at this point, but I still think if we compare it to all the other types, it's definitely a solid one. And if it actually is a good sword, it's a top tier knife, like straight up. Till this day, people appreciate this. The Artisan Foil, for example, even though that has a special animation for the right click, those are good looking skins. Those are good looking knife skins. So I definitely hope we get more unique special animations on all the sword skins. I think that definitely make them even better. Next up, one of the most solid knife types that we have in this game. Nothing about that actually is wrong. Everything about these type of knives is perfect. The Daggers, one of the best knives that we have in this game. Unfortunately, we don't get too many of them nowadays in the battle pass, for example. I love the fact that we got the Task Force dagger. That was, I feel like, the only one after the Rune dagger that actually was a dagger, if I remember correctly. Solid knives, Riva dagger, Glitch Pop dagger, all of these knives, Forsaken, they look pretty good. They have a solid animation, and overall, you know, I think everybody loves them. We can agree that this is probably one of the best type of knives that we have in this game, followed by the butterfly knives. The butterfly knives at this point are, you know, still top tier, probably one of the most satisfying knives to use. They look good. Everything about them I feel like is perfect. Now I know that many people disagree with the animation. Some people say that it is a bit too fast. I hope that at some point we get a second animation, just like with the Karambits, for example. I hope they implement a second animation for the butterfly knives, but in general, it is a pretty solid 10 out of 10 knife. And for the first place, for me personally, I think the Karambits, especially with the new animation that we have for the Riva dagger as well, which I kind of knew it, we had it on the Champions Karambit, but this animation in comparison with the Karambit knife type, I think is the best that we have in the game. Straight up, I think nothing is better right now, at least, than the combination of the Karambit knife type with this animation. Down the line, if we get more Karambits like this, they are going to be the top tier knives. If we don't get anything else, nothing new that actually is going to compete with this, because I don't think the butterfly in comparison looks better in terms of animations. I think the butterfly animation is top tier. I don't think it's better than what we have on the Karambit. So for now, it has to be my first place. We also have two knives I didn't mention here yet, which I think deserve to be on the list, but we only have one skin for each type. First off, the RGX Katana, and then also the Xeno Hunter knife. Wouldn't make too much sense to put them in the group because, again, it's just one knife. Both of these knives, again, if we get more of these, especially katanas, have the potential to be up there with the Karambit and butterfly knife. I'm gonna say this straight up, if we have more knives like the Xeno Hunter or the RGX Katana, definitely top tier knife type in this game. Unfortunately, as of now, we only have one. I'm pretty sure we are going to see a Katana with the Only 2.0 collection. I might be wrong, but I feel like that's just the most obvious choice. And yeah, a Xeno Hunter knife, again, we just need some more design on that knife. The default version, obviously, for the animation is top tier. My favorite knife to use still, next to the Karambit, the real Karambit, but it's just too boring right now. But in the future, though, if we get more of these type of knives, they will be top tier next to the Karambit and the butterfly knife, at least in my opinion. Again, here are some knives, by the way, that I still think could be pretty nice in game. The scythe that Tyros made, for example, would be a 10 out of 10 knife. Then also, you know, the only variants that actually didn't make it into the live version, those are pretty solid knife types that we could actually see at some point, would make for a great change. Nice options that we still have at this point that could make the game. And then honorable mentions for something like the Celestial knife. This definitely isn't a type, it's more like a gimmick, and what I like about it is just the pull-out animation. I think this is the most satisfying one still. It really doesn't belong in any type of knife though, so that's why I didn't mention this in this list. Same goes for probably all the other knives that I didn't mention here. But yeah, that's my entire list. As always, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Let me know what type of knife is your favorite one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I catch you on the next one.